All right, so it's about 5 after. We're going to get started, everyone. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us for Care to Celebrate. I'm Pathways Development Manager Liz Cottrell. And before we get started, I'm just going to share a couple housekeeping items with you. So we have muted all of you. We would love to talk to you, but for the sake of presentation, we've muted you. And so please use the chat feature with any questions or comments, and we definitely want to hear from you. I know Mike and Diana would love to have questions, and we want to encourage dialogue this evening, so please use the chat feature. And also, to optimize your viewing, you can adjust your settings in the upper right-hand corner. There's a view button. You can choose gallery or speaker view. So if you want maybe a little bit closer view of who is speaking, just click on speaker view, and that will help you. So as I mentioned before, Mike and Diana Gray of Grapevine Wines will be our virtual wine tasting hosts this evening, and they'll be guiding us through delicious wine and food pairings. In addition, Pathways program staff will be sharing some Pathways pairings, highlighting our different programs and how they address the specific needs of our participants. All right, I hope you have your wine chilled and your charcuterie, I said it right, the charcuterie items all ready to go. And we're going to start off the evening with Jessie. She will present our first Pathways pairing.
All right, hi everyone. So our first participant pairing of the night highlights Chris, the first Pathways participant to join our board of directors. There's a well-known quote in the disability rights movement that says, "Nothing about us without us." This basically means that if a service is designed to help a particular group of people, those people should have a voice and a say in how that service is designed and delivered. We felt that it was about time that a participant had a role on our board. Chris joined Pathways in 2013, and it's been a constant in his life for these past 8 years. Chris says that when he started, he did not have a social network and spent most of his time home in his room. Through Pathways events and with consistent staff support, Chris is now active in our program and his community and has become a leader in our group. Chris has supported Pathways over the years by attending fundraisers and is always willing to volunteer for events like our annual picnic or trivia night, coming early or staying late to help with whatever is needed. Socially, Chris has become more confident approaching and talking with others and now gets together independently outside the program with friends that he's made. As we discussed possible participants to invite to the board, we knew Chris would bring a unique voice and also speak to the experience of St. Charles County residents, an area where we hope to continue growing and expanding in the coming years. We're so grateful to Chris for accepting the invitation, and we can't wait to see where his thoughts, ideas, and perspective bring to our board this year. I'm going to send it to Mike and Diana for the first tastings of the night, and again, welcome.
Hi, we are so excited to be back with everyone from Pathways. We had a great time the first time we got to do this, and we're excited to be back. I think we've discussed, hopefully you're all set up, maybe a couple of wine glasses. I know Pathways provided you with a glass, but maybe a few more so you can taste back and forth and that you have your charcuterie set out. I totally agree. This is so much more fun if we interact. So I hope you know how to use that chat function. There's that little box that looks like a cartoon bubble, and you can tap on that and then just type questions to us. So if I'm looking distracted, I hope I'm chatting back and forth with all of you. If there's one thing we've learned when we do tastings, it's don't talk too long before you get that first drink in everybody's mouth. So we're gonna go for the first wine.
She stole my line.
Oh.
So our first white. So we have 2 whites, a rosé, 2 reds, and then a port at the end. And our first white is Dunes de Cap Ferret Bordeaux Blanc. It's a lighter style white. Bordeaux is known for their red wines mostly. 90% of what they produce is red. The reds are a blend of typically Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. And the whites are blends as well. The main three grapes for the whites are Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Muscadel. And so this is a style of Sauvignon Blanc. It is light, it is crisp, you get nice citrus flavors to it, and you get a lot of minerality because the clay and limestone soil that they have in Bordeaux, it just produces a very lively, nice, white, crisp wine. And so they also, to give it a little bit of texture, they actually let the wine rest on its lees. And the lees are really just the dead yeast cells. When you make wine, you put the juice down into the bottom of the tank or the barrel, you put in yeast cells, and the yeast eats the sugar to make alcohol and carbon dioxide that goes off in the atmosphere. But the yeast cells eventually die and settle to the bottom of the tank or the barrel, but they have complexities to them. So they'll take sticks and they'll blend it, mix it up, and let it mix up with the wine and then settle back down again and filter it off. And it just adds a complexity, a texture to it that is really nice. These vines that produce this wine are over 25 years old. And vines, as they get older, they produce less fruit, but the fruit that they do produce is really much more intense and flavorful. It's a really nice wine. It just goes great with pork and chicken, scallops, seafood, all kinds of appetizers. It's just a beautiful wine to have at the beginning of a meal, pretty much.
I'm going to talk briefly about tasting wine. And you can get as geeky as you want with this, or you can just disregard everything I say here. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we taste wine here. So we bring in good wines for you to put in your glass. And so really we can use almost all our senses. I don't hear much unless it's a champagne bottle popping, but all of our senses.
Which she enjoys quite a bit.
To taste wine. So the one we're most comfortable with is sight, right? So you can look at your wine and you can look at what color it is. So this is a nice straw, light colored yellow. We're going to go to a darker yellow here soon with our Chardonnay. And then we're going to go into the deep, beautiful ruby reds. Some of your older wines might be almost brick color. So, that can give you some information about the wine. You can see how dense it is. So our denser wines, you might not be able to see through, whereas I can almost read through this. It's like a magnifying glass. You can look for clarity. So some wines, especially now there's a big push for organic wines or natural wines, and they may not be filtered. They may have little floaty yeast cells and things floating around with them. And that might be just fine, depending on the style of the wine, but you can get an idea of the clarity. People like to talk about the legs, and you get those by swirling and watching the wine come down the glass. But that can be really a better indication of if your glass is clean and how much alcohol or sugar the wine has. That's not a great indicator of quality. So the next thing you want to do is smell a wine. And so if you think about your senses, your sense of smell is amazing. You can pick up thousands of different smells. So this is really giving you great information about the wine. It's not just a snooty thing to do. It really gets your tongue ready and your brain ready to receive more information. You can give it a swirl, which will release some of those odors. I usually put it on the table. Even though I'm wearing black, I usually wear wine if I swirl it. So I'm not one to do much red wine swirling in the air. But then just kind of stick your nose in there. So you might find things that are really obvious. So a lot of white wines smell kind of citrusy. And to me, this certainly has some kind of citrus notes to it. Sauvignon Blancs can have all kinds of aromas. They can be grassy, they can be citrusy. Some of the descriptions used for scents of wines aren't things that we normally think of eating, right? So like leather and tar. And I love Sauvignon Blanc, and one of the funniest descriptions is sometimes they smell like cat pee. Well, that doesn't sound like anything you want to drink, right? But some Sauvignon Blancs have that kind of odd aroma to them, which will give you some information maybe about where it's from.
Yeah, pipi la cat.
You look shy, yeah.
Sorry.
And really, you can train yourself to smell so many more things by just thinking about it. So if you're interested, if you want to think more about your wine, put your nose in there and see what things you can describe. Mike and I have the gift of working with two brilliant sommeliers. And what's fun is that sometimes all four of us taste or smell different things. So there isn't really right or wrong answers to those things. You bring your history with you and what you grew up in and what things feel like to you. And that a lot of that has to do with your sense of smell.
Yeah. Everyone's sense is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next you're gonna big truck going by, sorry. Next you'll want to taste that wine. And really, although you can recognize thousands of things in your nose, your mouth, your tongue, your mouth tissues will really recognize sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and now we talk about umami, which is this kind of savory sense that comes from some amino acids. But really, you're taking all that information that your brain had, or your brain got from your smell, and then washing it over your mouth. If you're more coordinated than some, a lot of people will then open their mouth and just draw a little air in over that wine. And that'll take all those aromas again up to their nose. So if you are one of the unfortunate people that had COVID, you know that your food had no taste when you were sick and you lost your sense of smell. And that's a great example of how important our sense of smell is to our taste and how well they work together. We talk about touch, our sense of touch. And really what that means is how it feels in your mouth. Does it feel thick and viscous? Does it feel thin? Does it coat your mouth? How does it feel in your mouth? And if you think of the Sauvignon Blanc and how it makes your mouth feel, it's going to be really different than when we taste that port at the end of the night. And then the last thing we might think about when we're tasting is the finish, or how long you can taste the wine. How long do those tastes linger? And that is usually considered a measure of quality. Better wines will linger longer. So now, if you're at home and you don't want to do any of that, I would suggest just give it a quick look, a quick smell, so that you can get your mouth ready for it, and then wash that down with your mouth.
Yeah.
Mike didn't want me to tell you the story, but I'm going to tell you why you need to look at your wine.
That's true.
Years ago, we were tasting some amazing high-end wine. I mean, some of the best producers in California. And at the very end of one of the bottles, our brother pours out the last little bit, and there is a bloated fly.
It is just wine soaked.
This fly got there in the winery. This was not a new fly. This is a fabulous winery. Things happen, but you might want to check your wine real quickly just to see what else is going on in there. All right.
So if you like Sauvignon Blanc, I hope you do. But if you compare that Sauvignon Blanc out of California or New Zealand, they're quite different. I mean, California, you do get a lot of citrus, but you get a lot of melon. You get a little more texture, a little more roundness to it. This has nice crisp acidity. If you like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and people typically either love it or they don't, but they are grassy. As Diana was saying, you can get a grassiness to it. They are they're really citrus driven, predominantly grapefruit. You get gooseberry, but they are really different styles. The Leda Valley and Chile produces what I think is more like the New Zealand style. But I think, I don't know about you, but I like all different styles of Sauvignon Blanc, whereas some people just like particular ones. But I do think that this Bordeaux Blanc is a really great example. And I forgot to mention that it's 60% Sauvignon Blanc, 20% Semillon, and 20% Muscadel. So you get a lot of that Sauvignon Blanc.
So if you have any of that Sauvignon Blanc left in a glass, now pour out your Chardonnay. This is Harkin Chardonnay. And like I said, if you have a little bit left, look at the difference. You can look quickly at the difference in the color. You can smell the difference, because they're really, pretty easy to smell the difference in those two wines.
They are. So this is Harkin Chardonnay. Oh, and the price
Oh, thanks.
on the Bordeaux Blanc is $14.99. So
Lauren
this is,
thinks that New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc smells like a summer picnic.
I would agree.
Yeah, people loved it. I love this wine. We really enjoy it.
Good. So Harkin Chardonnay, it is, Chardonnay is still the most popular white varietal that we sell. And I think it's because it comes in so many different styles. You can do so many things to Chardonnay. You can manipulate it in so many ways. You can ferment the wine, a Chardonnay, in an oak barrel. You can then age it in an oak barrel to make it even oakier. You can put it through malolactic fermentation that takes that green, tart, green apple flavor and turns it into a buttery flavor. So they take malic acid and turn it into lactic acid. Lactic, lactose, buttery, creamy, that sort of thing. The French kind of think that we've ruined the taste of Chardonnay in America. What they do, again, I think I mentioned they're in a cool climate, up in Burgundy. It's a very cool climate. So they get a lot of acidity. So when they put theirs through 100% malolactic fermentation, all they really do is tone down that acidity, which is a nice thing. In California, when they put it through malolactic fermentation, there's not a whole lot of acidity. You get a lot of sunshine, you get a lot of ripeness, a lot of sugar, not as much acidity. Sometimes they have to add acidity to the wine to make it more balanced. But when you do malolactic fermentation to a California Chardonnay, you're getting all that butteriness, that creaminess. It really adds to that flavor. When they put it on oak in France, they typically use French oak, of course. And the French oak barrels, the pores are not very big. They're not very deep. And the wine does get into it, but it puts a subtle characteristic of oak into the wine. We in America use American oak in California, and the pores are really, are really wider. The wine gets in there, and you get a much bigger impact of oak. Something's going on. Harkin kind of likes the term remember when you think about the good old days, when in their case, but Chardonnays out of California were oaky and buttery. In the 80s and the 90s, that's all you got out of California were big oak bombs, oak butter bombs. And a lot of wineries went away from that. And a lot of people wonder why they did. So Harkin has brought that back. And their wine is 100% barrel fermented Chardonnay. And the great thing about it, it's $12.99. Oak barrels are really expensive. So typically an oaky Chardonnay is much more expensive, like Rambar, in the mid to high 30s. This is only $12.99, and you get that oak flavor to it. You get, when you drink it, you think of creme brulee and buttered toast. You get the butteriness, you get the toast, from that oak barrel, and it's just a big style. It's a very popular style for us.
We're going to talk a little bit about food and wine pairing. So what I'm suggesting with we use the Sauvignon Blanc kind of as a palate cleanser, if you will. And with the Chardonnay, we have this beautiful cheese. So this is Sartori's balsamic, and they start with a beautiful Bella Vita Gold, almost like a Parmesan, and then infuse it with balsamic vinegar. And I think it really is beautiful with this cheese. Don't eat all your cheese because we have something fun coming later, but you can eat a lot of your cheese. And so it's got that rich creaminess that really goes well with the Chardonnay. So that kind of brings us into food and wine pairings. And, the one everyone thinks of is white with fish and red with beef. And that's not a bad concept. There's a lot of ways to play with that. But I think the most important concept is if you don't like the wine or you don't like the food, it's not a good pairing. So if someone tells you you have to drink a giant cab with a steak and you hate giant cabs, it's not going to be good together. So I think that's the most important thing. And then typically we think of pairing similar weights of or intensities of food. So with that beautiful white Bordeaux that we had first, I think that goes beautifully with scallops. But think of those same beautiful scallops with that big bad cab. You're going to lose those scallops because the weights and the intensities of the flavors are different. We also talk about higher acid or higher tannins of foods going really well with fatty foods. So a little later on, we're going to have a Pinot Noir that can have some good acid with this cured meat that we have. So fatty foods can go really well with tannic or acidic wines. But that also brings us to a concept that we think of making complementary or contradictory almost pairings. So if you think of a complementary pairing, this oaky, buttery chard with the cheese are complementary. They're both rich and creamy and kind of woody and oaky, and they go well together. Another way you can pair, though, is to do kind of an opposite. So if I'm eating a big bowl of carbonara with bacon and cream and cheese, and then I have a creamy Chardonnay, although the weights and the intensities might be the same, I might find that kind of overwhelming. Whereas if I had a fresh, crisp Italian, like a Pinot Grigio or some other beautiful Italian wine, it would kind of cleanse my palate a little bit. And to me, that might be a better pairing, even though it goes against that first of the same intensity. A lot of people like to say when they're talking about pairing, if it grows together, it goes together. And I think that's really a fun way to pair wine too. The classic example of this is Italy. And centuries ago, because of the geography, all the little villages were a little landlocked. There wasn't a ton of migration and moving across the country. And so the villages developed wines and foods that worked beautifully together. So Sicilian wines are totally different than Piedmont wines. So I might want a big Barbaresco with an earthy pasta and mushrooms because they would come from the same region. Whereas in Sicily, I might be more likely to drink those wines with seafood. So if you're in an area, particularly if you're out of the country, if it grows together, it goes together. Yeah. And then the last thing I like to think about is like similar flavors. So classic example, earthy mushrooms with an earthy Pinot Noir. They always go beautifully together. But I'm going to go back to, if you don't like it, it doesn't work as a food pairing.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, we are going to move on to the rosé. So rosés have gotten so popular in the past 5-7 years. I mean, we used to do tastings here at the shop, and we would start doing a lot of dry rosés. And every time that somebody would look at it, they'd say, "Stop, I don't like sweet wine." We would have to convince them that it is a dry wine. Dry rosés are beautiful. You let all the alcohol, all the sugar be consumed by the yeast to become a dry wine. And you know, don't get me wrong, white Zinfandel, what people think about, it's a really good thing for the wine business. It was for the wine business in the United States because we Americans always liked our sweeter drinks, our juices, our sodas, you know, lemonade, sweet iced tea, things like that. So it got people drinking wine because it was sweet. And then I think over the past couple of decades, people's palates have improved and moved away from the sweetness, and now they can appreciate the flavors of a dry wine. And not all, you know, you won't like all wines, but you can, people's palates have really moved on. It's a great summer wine. We're moving out of summer, but you know, in the summer when you're barbecuing outside and you think, "Ooh, I've got a great steak on the grill. I'm going to open a big Cabernet or red blend," and you end up opening it, and it just doesn't. It's not refreshing. It doesn't make you feel cooler out in the hot sun. It doesn't refresh you. It just makes you feel heavier. and hotter, you know. So rosés, you got a little bit of that red flavor in the wine, and you chill it down, and they're absolutely beautiful. They're beautiful food wines. They have nice acidity. And now we're turning into fall, and you think, okay, rosé is over. But year after year,
Rosé is never over.
it's not. People drink white wine in the winter. More and more people are drinking rosé in the winter as well. Thanksgiving dinner, great example of how a wine can go with so many different flavors on your table at Thanksgiving. So it's really beautiful. You get soft raspberry, strawberry flavors. This wine is from Provence, France, kind of the southeast corner of the country. And it is the rosé capital of the world. 90% of what they produce is dry, still wine, rosé wine. And you know, the main grapes that they use are typically lighter, Grenache, some Mourvedre, Cinsault, but it gives you those soft raspberry, strawberry fruit flavors that are just so delightful and refreshing. So that's it.
I just love how this smells. Oh,
And the color is just, you can just tell Provence rosé. There are rosés from all over the world, from
Everywhere.
different grapes.
yeah.
You can make it from Cabernet, Merlot. You can make it from Zinfandel, and
you
have
can
it
make
be
it
a
dry,
rosé, a dry
Or you can
rosé.
leave it sweet.
But Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault, but from Provence, they come out with this beautiful salmon color that you see. It's just gorgeous. You can spot them right away.
So I'm going to suggest that you pick out some of the cherries from the fruit and nut mixture. So you may have noticed we're using fruit and nuts twice, which is, I think, a really interesting way to think about food and wine, because they're such different wines and they're really different fruits and nuts. But these cherries, these dried cherries, will bring out some of those fruity flavors in the rosé. So chew them up, throw a little of that rosé over it, and see what you think of that. And then try
Sure.
like one of the salty nuts with it and see what that does to the wine. So salt isn't the best friend of wines. It's not as bad as vinegar or asparagus or some other things that are hard to pair. But I think that these cherries can kind of bring out some of those good flavors in the wine. Somebody commented earlier about the cheese and the chard. So the cheese really brings out the weight of this wine nicely. Not usually a chard fan, but this cheese is a good friend of this chard. I think that is the fun of food and wine pairing. So I'm not a chard fan typically either, but with the right foods. So if I hated chard, I'll go back to that. But if I'm just like, it's not my favorite, and then you have it with the right food, it really does complement both the food and the wine. And it can be fun to play with. So of those first three, get on your chat and tell me what your favorite wine was so far. Did you say how much the Lavandette was?
$13.99. I
You
did
may
not.
have. I don't know.
I did not.
So what's your favorite wine?
And are you rosé drinkers? I'm curious.
Rosé all day. Thank you, Jason. I agree. The Bordeaux. Oh, the white Bordeaux. Chard. See, isn't that fun? The answers are all over the board. And that's one of the really fun things about wine is there are truly bad wines, but generally, if you like it, it's a good wine. So, it's really fun to play with, and we can all have different opinions. All right, I believe it is time to,
Commercial?
I believe it's time, to turn it back to Pathways for a few minutes.
Pathway.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike and Diana. My name is Alyssa, and I am a program manager at Pathways, and I am here to highlight our young adult program. The Pathways Young Adult Program is for individuals ages 16 to 21 and officially began in September of 2020. This program is modeled similarly to our adult services and aims to be a consistent space of support and socialization for teens and young adults as they navigate their transition from adolescence to young adulthood. Sophie, one of our young adult participants, has experienced a lot of change in the last year. She's graduated from high school, moved to a new county, gotten her license, and is hoping to get a job soon. During a time of so much change, Sophie likes that Pathways has given her a chance to meet new people and to consistently get out of the house because making plans can be difficult for her. Participating in Pathways events has encouraged Sophie to independently manage her social obligations and has given her the confidence to drive new places, making her more comfortable on the road. In the upcoming year, Sophie is hoping to continue to make progress in initiating conversations with new peers and to strengthen her connections enough to hang out with friends outside of Pathways events. As our young adult program continues to grow, we hope to be able to make an impact on more young adults like Sophie. And I will now hand it back over to you, Diana and Mike.
Caught us with our mouth full.
Mhm.
Sorry. All right.
Avalon.
So we're going to go on to our first red.
So we, go ahead.
See
Oh,
Avalon?
no, that's the wrong bottle.
Sure is.
Nice red label.
It is the Avalon Pinot Noir.
So Avalon Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir in general is a very thin-skinned. It's a fickle grape to grow. When you're talking about skins and tannins, so compared to Cabernet, Pinot Noir is a big, fat, red grape with a really thin skin. And the tannins or the bitterness that you get in red wine are found in the skin with those tannins. And a Cabernet grape, for example, is a very small grape. It has a very thick skin. So the ratio of tannin in that thick skin to that little bit of juice that you get, it's really high. And a lot of people say, ooh, I don't like bitterness. I don't want to be drinking bitterness or tannins in my red wine. If you like coffee, if you like black coffee, if you like Cabernet, you do like bitterness. Those are the characteristics of those items.
I'm sorry, someone asked if they should rinse their glass, and that's a great question. Sometimes we talk a little bit about that. We did tonight. As long as you're going lighter to heavier, you don't need to. You could, but we kind of think that a little bit of white Bordeaux in our red is better than water. But yeah, there's lots of opinions on that. So it's up to you if you should rinse your glass.
Yeah, good question. If you do go from red back to white, I probably would rinse it. Otherwise, you'll have kind of a blush colored wine left over.
Someone just said,
oh,
we'll get to that. Sharp.
You're sharp. Okay. So I could.
Good job, Lisa.
I can talk about that.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about light wines and heavier wines, I like to think about it when you're talking about milk. So there's skim milk, 2% milk, and whole milk. And in the wine comparison, Pinot Noir would be your skim milk. Merlot might be your 2%, and Cabernet might be your whole milk. It's the impact that you feel on your palate. And so Pinot Noir is very light, very easy drinking, and a lighter style wine in many ways. And Cabernet would be that big impact that you would feel on your palate. It's a fickle grape to grow. It's got that thin skin, so it doesn't like to grow in certain areas. Back in the 70s and 80s, when California was just getting started, they were planting basically every grape everywhere. And they soon learned that many grapes didn't like to grow in certain areas. Pinot Noir is thin-skinned, and it doesn't like the heat, whereas Cabernet is thick-skinned, and it likes a lot of heat. Zinfandel likes a lot of heat. But you'll see Pinot Noir now planted in really cool climate areas. You know, at the bottom of Napa and Sonoma is this region called Carneros, and it's right on the San Francisco Bay, and the fog moves right up every morning, sits above the grapes, the sun beats down, doesn't hit the grapes because of the fog, but eventually it burns off the fog and ripens the fruit in the afternoon. It just needs a little bit of that sun to ripen, whereas Cabernet needs a lot of sun. In Sonoma, you have the Sonoma, the coast, the ocean coast, with that cool breeze cooling off the grapes all day long. Perfect situation for Pinot Noir. It's go ahead.
I was going to say, our manager calls Pinot Noir the teenager of the wine world because it's so fickle, and sometimes it thrives, sometimes it doesn't. You never know what mood it'll express. Calls it a teenager.
That's great. So back when we started, I read an article. We were reading, tons about wine at that time, and still do. But I read an article that this guy predicted that Pinot Noir would never be big because it's hard to pronounce, and people were not willing to look silly in front of their friends and their colleagues and try to order Pinot Noir at a restaurant or at dinner. So they just weren't going to order it, and Pinot Noir would never be big. And then the movie Sideways, if you've seen it, the movie Sideways came out, and it was all about Pinot Noir, trashed Merlot, which was really big at the time, and Pinot Noir took off. And at some point during this period, I saw this kid, he was probably 25 years old, and he was wearing a shirt that across the top said PEENO, and then it had a big capital R with a circle around it and a line through it. I don't know if you can see it.
They can, because somebody brought it up.
Well, yeah. So I saw this shirt and I thought, we have got to find those shirts on the internet and sell them. And I looked and I couldn't find them. And I told the story, and they said, you need to make the shirts yourself. And I think I figured out you had to get a decent price, down to a decent price, you had to buy 1,000 of them at a time. So we weren't going to do that, especially back then. But so I told this story at one of our virtual tastings for our customers, and a customer of ours made the shirt for me. So I try to wear it as often as I can for tastings and things like that. And I can see it pretty well.
Yeah.
But it just proved this guy's article wrong, that Pinot Noir is so big. And this wine is $10.99 a bottle. It has nice texture to it. It sees a little oak. It gives a little bit of texture to it. It has soft strawberry, raspberry fruit flavors to it. It's got a little bit cherry notes, kind of silky. And we always said, I bet a decade ago, we said, man, it is impossible to get inexpensive, good Pinot Noir. You always had to spend a little bit more in order to get a decent Pinot. And this, lately, we are being proved wrong. This is a really nice wine. I mean, don't get me wrong. We have $20 or $25 Pinots that are just gorgeous, nicer than this, but for this money, it is just a great Pinot Noir. And it too, for Thanksgiving, is your perfect Thanksgiving dinner wine. It is a light-bodied wine, so it goes with lighter style meats, pork, like ham, and turkey on your Thanksgiving dinner table. It's just perfect.
We have lots of fun things to talk about with that people are asking. So a lot of people are asking about Oregon Pinot. Is that the best Pinot? And I think that comes down to, again, like preference and style.
Absolutely.
So they can be a little more earthy, a little more funky, not always. I love an earthy, funky wine. Not everybody does. Oregon produces fabulous Pinots, but it kind of comes down to your style. So this is a more fruit-forward Pinot.
And some Oregon Pinots are more fruit-forward, not as earthy as others, but some can be very Burgundian. The cool climate
like
in Burgundy
in France.
Burgundy, France, and Oregon are on the same latitude, and that's why they produce wines similar.
Someone asked about why you chill the reds before. And again, temperature was one of the things that we edited out because we thought you might want to tune off before midnight. But because we can talk that long. But we think of serving reds at room temperature, but really reds are often the best at what we more think of as like cellar or castle temperature, right? Like 60-ish.
Hundreds of years ago when they made the rule, room temperature was 60 to 65 degrees in these old castles in Europe. Not like today where it's 70 to 75 degrees.
Yeah. And if beverages, wine gets warmer, you will get a lot more alcohol out of it. It'll taste more hot. You'll miss some of the nuances. So it can absolutely go down to preference. We tend to add just a little bit of chill to our red because we think it brings out the flavors better. Which red wines don't give people like me a headache? Oh, there's so many things I think that can cause headaches. I mean, there's the obvious, don't drink too much, drink water, whatever. But I think the longer we've been in business now 25 years, and I now believe that like bodies are so different. Quirky, I get a headache from Sauvignon Blanc. I have no possible explanation from that, but I know it's true. It's not just that I love Sauvignon Blanc and drink too much. So I would really recommend keeping a diary of wine and how you reacted to it. There are people that feel like it's the sulfites in wine. I think for a few people that really is true, and there's filters and all kinds of things that you can do to remove some of that. You could try that. There's wine drops that will help it come out.
There's all kinds of articles that dispute that as well. So
Yeah.
who knows? It's just
I don't
your
know.
body.
But I believe you.
We have one woman who drank the same Merlot for, 20 years, and now she can't drink it, but she can drink, I think, Pinot Noir. She came in and tried a couple Pinot Noirs last time.
Who knows?
So
You good?
I'm good.
So let's go talk a little bit about food again. So we talked about a little more acidic wines being good with fatty foods. So take some of that cured meat that you have and try it with the Pinot Noir. So I think it's really fun to blend those two together. If you have any of that Sauvignon Blanc or that white Bordeaux, that would be another thing you could do with a fatty meat because it's that nice high acid. You can try it with our last wine that'll have a little more structure and a little more tannin to it and see how it changes the meat and the food. But I really like a smoked meat with a Pinot Noir.
Oh, I love salmon, tenderloin, scallops if you're drinking a red. If you're not, you're drinking Sauvignon Blanc, I would say. But Pinot is just a perfect pairing with salmon and pork tenderloin, two of my favorite. And when she cooks it, she's a very good cook.
Do you want to talk about vintage, or do you want me
Yeah,
to?
vintage. So the vintage on the bottle.
It's a year the grapes are picked,
Yep, you can make the wine.
harvested.
Harvested. You can make the wine, and it's really important. It's all about the vintage. It's all about Mother Nature. What you want in a growing season is a long, warm, dry growing season, and you can get that all year long. From the beginning, you can get a nice bud break. You can get nice warm weather, dry, and at the very end, you just never know what's going to happen. It could look cloudy and stormy, and the winemakers and the vineyard managers have to decide, do we want to pick now before it's maybe fully ripened, or do we want to let it rain and hope that the sun comes out and dries up the ground? Because what you have all summer long are these little thirsty, small, concentrated grapes. The more thirsty they are, the more concentrated the flavors. And if it rains, they are just going to suck up all that water. So vintage is really important. Every wine in our shop, it becomes a new wine the next year. It may still be grape, and it may not.
We brought in this Pinot that we're drinking because we sold
another wine, another
300
Pinot Noir.
cases of another Pinot that we loved and our customers love. And this year, it just isn't good.
And so we're not going to bring it in. And everybody still wants it, but we just try to move them and convince them that they're, that they don't want the new vintage of this wine. Yeah. Where are we going to talk about?
And I think that's what a wine shop brings to the table.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, some of the big box stores, some of the larger grocery stores may continue to bring in a wine year after year, and it can change dramatically. So that's our push for a little wine shop.
Yeah, a lot of people always ask about what the fires are going to do out in California.
Oh, fires, yeah. That's a good point.
And it is, for 2020, it wasn't great in 17, but for 2020, it's really going to be bad. It's going to be devastating. A lot of wineries are not producing their wines at all. There's just so much smoke taint.
And that's a great example of why it's important to taste vintage. There are wineries that have been able to escape the effects of the fires. And there's other wineries that we love and we taste their wines. There's all kinds of ways that they're trying to stabilize it, but what they're finding is it stabilizes it for a short time and then that smoke taint comes back.
Yeah.
So we are tasting everything and skipping a lot of wineries vintages, unfortunately, because they just aren't good.
Yeah, and it's just certain parts of California. The Central
Yeah.
Coast, I think, was excluded. And we've done it before. Whenever there's a bad vintage, California, Europe can have much more of a swing in vintage, from really good to really bad. California, weather-wise, excluding the fires, has been fortunate because they get a lot of sun. And their vintages are either good or great, typically. Every so often, 2011, 2018, they have a bad vintage. And what we try to do is buy up and bridge that bad vintage as much as we can, just to keep better wines, what we feel are better wines in the shop. Okay.
Okay, so this is the label I showed you before. Tried to sell it as the last wine, but now it really is. This is Kamomi. It's a Napa Valley Rosso, a red blend.
And she likes that label too because it's red. It will go in her gift boxes this holiday
This
season.
is true.
So Kamomi is a red blend, and red blends are kind of cool because, if you have a wine that is a single varietal on the label, like a Cabernet or a Merlot or Chardonnay, the majority of the grapes in that wine are that varietal. Doesn't mean all of it is. You got to remember that only 75% of that wine, if it says Cabernet, has to be Cabernet. 75% can be other grapes. But what red blends are really popular too amongst our customers. But it gives a complexity because you're adding the characteristics of all these different grapes when you put it into the wine, and it really makes them more interesting. It also helps out the winery quite a bit because they are not locked into this 75% number, and they can create a label and whatever grows best that year. If it's hot, Cabernet and Zinfandel would like that, but Merlot would not. If it's a cool year, Merlot does really well. It likes a cooler climate. So they can add wines, put in more of what grew well that year, and make a better wine that way. And I was going to say also, if you ever do see a Cabernet out of Napa Valley that's 100% Cabernet, they will tout it. I mean, it's very rare. Typically, they blend in Merlot, Malbec, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, those Bordeaux varietals that we grow in California as well. But this wine is it's called Kamomi. It's from the House of Momi. It's an Italian winemaker, the House of Momi that came over to California, CA. So it's Kamomi, CA, and then Momi. And it is a blend of Cabernet, Zinfandel, and Merlot, and a little bit of Petit Syrah. The Italians are really the ones credited for bringing Zinfandel over to the United States, to California. And it has become really California's wine. I have seen a couple of Zinfandels out of Australia. They were okay. I've seen actually a couple of Zinfandels out of Italy, or what they call the grape in Italy is Primitivo. It's the same grape, but we just call it Zinfandel here. And it's really become California's wine. You get nice, dark cherry flavor in this wine. It's kind of supple. It's aged 4 to 6 months in French and American oak, and then they blend it all together. And it gives it a nice richness to it. But it's just a great red blend. $12.99 is the price. And we really have enjoyed it. It's a good seller for us, and I hope you like it.
So I'm going to get to a question here in a minute on Augusta and comparing that to other areas. But since we have this Camovi in our glass, if you haven't yet delved into this little pot of deliciousness, this mostarda, this is a cherry fig preserve done with a little vinegar, and it does have a little bite or a little vinegar to it. I love it with big full reds. I just think the flavors are so beautiful. And if you really want to do it well, take a little bit of that cheese that I told you to hold on to, and then put the mostarda on it and chew that up, and then wash that red wine over it. So this little mostarda is probably our best selling condiment type of food. We have it in small jars like you received, and people loved it so much we also brought in the big jars because people can't get enough of it. So hopefully you like that too. I'm going to ask you in a minute what your favorite wine, what your favorite food was so far. But we got the question about Augusta, and some people saying it's going to be the next Napa Valley. And I think there's so many wonderful things about Augusta. It's beautiful. I love the tourist industry. They're doing much better with their wines. But I think we have to consider the climate here in Missouri, and it's really challenging to grow great grapes in Missouri. So we keep trying hybrids and grafting and doing things, and things are getting better. I think that unequivocally it can become a vacation spot.
It definitely will.
I question whether the wines of Augusta will ever be the world-class wines of Napa, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope we figure out how to do that, but I don't think the science and the technology is there quite yet. And they're producing a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, whether it will draw people like it does, like they do to California, because the wines are there as well.
Yeah.
But it definitely will be a great excursion, I think.
Yeah.
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 A lot of money going into it.
There is. Okay, so someone said the Pinot Noir was their favorite so far of all the wines.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that? And someone asked about the fires, and I think we were answering that when you typed it, but if we didn't address that fully, let me know. So looks like we'll turn it back to Pathways.
Hello, my name is Jamie, and I am a program manager at Pathways. I'm going to be talking about our new Community Connections program and a participant named Al. Al has struggled throughout their life with their gender identity and feeling like they didn't fit in with their peers. A few years ago, Al came out as non-binary and started using the pronouns they, them, their. Al has been accepted and supported in their gender identity by their peers and staff at Pathways, as well as at their independent living community, St. Louis Life, which is in O'Fallon. However, they didn't have many opportunities to interact with other non-binary individuals, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Al has attended Pathways LGBTQ group, a regular virtual event that is held most months. After talking with Al after this event, Al expressed that they were excited to have the LGBTQ plus group at Pathways, but wanted more opportunities to talk about how they feel and the issues that are important to them. Recently, Pathways has started a new Community Connections program where participants have staff support in joining an existing community group. Participants can receive support in finding, joining, and maintaining connections with a community group of their choosing. I suggested that they might benefit from an LGBTQ support group as part of the Community Connections program at Pathways. And I reached out to Kayla from the SHADE program at YWCA. Morgan's going to be talking more about that program and how we've partnered at Pathways with them as well. And Kayla from SHADE recommended the Metro Trans Umbrella Group. And this organization has a support group called Expression Spectrum, specifically for people who identify as non-binary. And it's a virtual group. Al was interested in joining the Expression Spectrum group and has attended group meetings on Zoom completely independently. Al still benefits from some staff support to remain connected to their group and to advocate for some supports that they need in order to stay connected. When I asked Al about how they felt joining this new group, they said it helps to know that there are people going through the same thing as me. And now I will turn it over to Morgan, who's going to highlight our next participant pairing.
Thank you, Jamie. Hello, I'm very excited to share Barrett's story with you this evening. His connection with one of our community partners represents a unique pairing from the past year. Pathways has capitalized on the ease and convenience of virtual programming to pair our families with a diverse offering of community resources. Over the last year, these have ranged from financial planning resources to relationship coaching. Guest speakers have shared their expertise while teaching social college courses or hosting virtual family events. These events have transformed the way that we are able to partner with our community agencies because they allow guest speakers to present directly to a large group of people, rather than our staff referring Pathways families by word of mouth or through means of individual follow-up. As you will soon see in Barrett's story, the use of these community pairings allows our team to focus on what we know best, those social and communication skills, while offering opportunities for our participants to grow and develop in other meaningful areas. On to Barrett's story. One of his goals is to have a girlfriend, and prior to this year, his dating attempts were not as successful as his Texas Hold'em skills. Barrett was not afraid to take risks or place bets, but he lacked the skills to navigate healthy romantic relationships. With a little encouragement from staff, Barrett attended a series of social college classes hosted by our community partner, Shade. The Shade program exists specifically to offer healthy relationship support and sexual health education to individuals with developmental disabilities. Barrett continued to work with Shade one-on-one even after our social college classes ended. He received individualized support as he navigated his first dates and then later to set boundaries with his first ever girlfriend. Barrett reported that the Shade classes were most helpful in allowing him to recognize healthy versus unhealthy aspects of relationships. And finally, Barrett's mom was also able to participate in a family event at Pathways. Parents came together to discuss the Shade program and learn more about what this community agency offers. At the same time, parents also were able to talk casually about the unique dating challenges of their adult participants. This event is just one example of the monthly family programming that we now offer at Pathways to Independence. These family events, I believe, are really the best pairing of all because they allow us to highlight resources that are available within our own Pathways community. I have been told that the exchange of ideas, resources, and support has enriched the Pathways experience for our Pathways families. And I'll pass it over now to Diana and Mike for our final pairing of the evening.
Thank you. What a great information. I love your pairings. I don't think we talked much about ourselves. Mike and I have been in business now for 25 years. We just had our 25th anniversary, which is pretty amazing because we haven't aged at all.
You should see the pictures.
We are a wine, spirit, beer, accessory and gift store in downtown Kirkwood. We are doing both curbside and walk-in business, whatever people are most comfortable with. And our big transition lately is Mike's brother, who was our partner for almost all of those 25 years, retired. And we have hired two wonderful people.
Both sommeliers, very knowledgeable.
But very approachable.
Yeah, they're great.
So that's a little bit about us. We're going to go on to the port.
Yeah. So this is a Penfolds tawny port. And port really originated back in the early 18th century. The British at the time drank a lot of wine, and they shipped a lot of wine to all their colonies and their commonwealth. And they drank mostly French Bordeaux. That was their big thing. And these French Bordeaux were big, bold wines that could last during the shipment to all their colonies in India and Australia. I guess they came to Canada, South Africa. But one year, England was at war with France, and the French said, by the way, we're not going to send you any wine. And so they were thinking, what are we going to do? But they thought, no problem. We have a lot of British landowners in Portugal who are producing wine. We'll just send those wines around the world to our people. And what they found was that those wines didn't have the same structure. When they got to the destination, they were just toast. They just didn't make the long, hot journey, and they couldn't be drunk. So they figured out they had to fortify the wine somehow. So what they did was they created port. And during the winemaking process, as the yeast is eating the sugar to make wine, what they do is they add a neutral grain alcohol or a neutral grain brandy to the tank, and it immediately kills off the alcohol level. 18-20% of that brandy immediately kills off the yeast cells, and you end up with a fortified sweet wine. So they would bottle that and they would ship that to all their different destinations around the world, and it worked great. So tawny was created, port was created. There's two types of main types of port. One is the vintage character, and one is the tawny. The vintage character, if you've ever seen it, they are deep, dark, purple wines. They're fortified 18-20% typically. They're sweet, and they have big, dark, red berry flavors. They are bold wines. And there's basically three types of vintage character. There's their vintage port, which is their flagship. When they make their vintage port, they typically only make it every 3 out of every 10 years. Only when the weather is perfect. And a winery might have, 7 or 10 different vineyards that they own, and they may have 2 or 3 that are their best vineyards. And when they make their vintage port, they only draw grapes, the very best grapes from that year, from their very best vineyards in the very best year for the weather. So only 3 out of 10 years on average do they make a vintage port. And when they age it, they put it in a barrel for 2 years, and that barrel breathes. Air gets in, comes out. The wine ages very rapidly. After 2 years, they put it into a bottle, and the aging process comes to a screeching halt because the glass doesn't allow the air in. And you don't want to be drinking vintage ports for probably 10 to 15 years from the date on that vintage. The next level down is called late bottled vintage, and LBVs for short. And they will draw the grapes, those lesser grapes from their best vineyards, or the best grapes from their lesser vineyards, and they will use those grapes. But they let those wines age in the barrel for 4 to 7 years. So the aging process is very rapid. So that then when they bottle the wine, when they take it out of barrel and bottle it, it's ready to drink. And then the third level is just your ruby port. It's your house port. It's your house wine. It's simple, easy drinking, sweet, flavorful, but doesn't have the characteristics of an LBV or a vintage port, but doesn't have the price either. Vintage ports are probably $100 on average. LBVs are probably 25 to 40 bucks, 50 bucks. And then ruby ports are like 15 to 25, maybe, much less expensive. And then there's tawny port, which we're about to have. Tawny ports get their name from their color. It's kind of brick tone in color. And in Portugal, you will see tawny ports that are 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And what that is basically an average age of the wine in that bottle. You go from 10 to 20 in my opinion, your quality makes a big jump in quality for not a big jump in price. When you go to the 30 and the 40, much more rare, and the price really goes up. But where you have the purple, dark berry flavors of a vintage character port, this has more nuttiness, more caramel. I read a description once that said like moist brown sugar. And it just tastes, you could just taste that brown sugar in there. They're perfect with dessert, with creme brulee, with cheesecake, with ice cream. You could pour it over ice cream, whatever you wish. With nuts, port goes very well with nuts. And these are chocolate covered cherries that you got. They're just, it's a great dessert wine. And this is out of Australia, and it's inexpensive and flavorful. It's kind of your equivalent of a ruby port in the vintage character. But it's $14.99 a bottle, and it just has a nice texture and a nice sweetness, and you get that caramel and that nuttiness to it.
So we were playing around with the virtual tasting, pairing food and wine, and our staff was split in which was better, the cherries or the nuts with this port. So I thought, well, I better include both of them. And I think it's fun because their cherries and nuts are so different than what we did with the rosé, right? They're much sweeter. Your food, one of the pairing concepts is the food should be sweeter than the wine. And so I think this is, you know, these are both much sweeter than the wine. What do you think?
I was not in on the taste test.
I know you weren't there. So tell me what you like with it, the cherries or the nuts. Someone asked how we get more of these cherries, right? Are these like the most delicious things? We sell these bagged at the store by the boatload because they are so delicious.
I need to retaste.
It's challenging here. The viscosity and the the port has never peeled. But I think that delicious purr. Yeah.
I think the nuts.
So
I'd vote for nuts.
You voted for nuts. I was, that makes 3 nuts and 1 cherry. I was a cherry and everybody else said the nuts with it. I really like the fruitiness of the wine and the cherries together and that deep flavor. But I think there's a lot to be said for the nuts with it.
Well, it's
Just
a caramelized
Port,
pecan, isn't it?
absolutely. So if you look up pairing, or you will see that Andy's frozen custard is probably the classic pairing.
So
Lisa, yes, port does
Over
go with
Andy's.
Andy's.
no, and we're right next door.
We
If
are
you
right
wanna-
next
if you
door.
wanna
so
come
you
get
can do your
both.
port and your ice and your custard, or
Yeah.
it's pumpkin season over there. We're heavily into the pumpkin pie at Andy's.
And
So,
they make their own pumpkin pie.
nuts, cherries, yeah, so kind of mixed too. Yeah. So before we sign off, please ask us any questions that you have that we might be able to answer for you. Please remember that until Monday, 10% of any wine, food, or accessory purchases that you make, if you mention the tasting, will go back to Pathways. So feel free to either look on our website or come in and see us and mention Pathways. My
think that's what
parents
we
are
said.
nuts, both. Pun intended, I'm sure my kids would say the same. My parents are nuts. My parents are nuts, I'm both. So white wine that we got. Oh, the full
Oh.
bottle. Thank you.
Oh, Balnea.
Yeah.
It's a rueda from Spain, in the western part of Spain. And you do, again, get, it is very light, very crisp, beautiful food wine with fish. But you get nice citrus and a little minerality from that as well. That's, oh,
Someone asked if I could line up the labels, and we can absolutely do that. I'm going to then move my screen because you won't be able to see it till I move them. You're gonna put the board up there also.
yep. I love that.
Can you see it? Tell me when I'm.
You got it.
Can you see that? Hopefully. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the grape of the rueda, or the rueda is verdejo. So a little bit more texture probably than a white Bordeaux, but it's a
Yeah,
great
that's
little
true.
wine.
The bottles are
Yeah.
labeled, and I hopefully you got a little purple sheet that also listed out all the wines and foods, and we'll give our our email address and our website and our street address. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Anything else we want to talk about while we're eating the rest of our cherries?
Should we raise it up again?
So we're going to turn it back over to Pathways, but we will stay here and answer questions as long as people are still on.
Thank you so much, Diana and Mike. I'm Jody. I'm Executive Director here at Pathways to Independence. And I appreciate everyone joining us this evening for our second virtual wine tasting. Who knew a year ago that we would be doing this in a round 2, but I guess the circumstances are just so that we do that. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I thought I'd spend a little bit more time highlighting some of our successes of this past year. Just as we've highlighted some of our Pathways pairings, I thought I'd build upon that just a little bit. Our newly launched young adult program supported not only Sophie this past year, but 11 other young adults from across our region. The program is designed to connect young adults to their peers prior to them leaving high school so they can begin to build new friendships before graduation. This became very important to Pathways as we looked at our strategic plan and knew that there was a gap in services for these young adults, that they often hit the service cliff once they left high school, and Pathways felt that we could come in and provide the supports through this young adult program. And I think the fact that we were able to launch a program during a pandemic and had 12 individuals join us this past year was an incredible feat and an accomplishment for our organization. We've also spent a lot of time working on diversity and inclusion, and that's meant a tremendous amount to Pathways. Jesse shared with us the fact that we had our first ever Pathways participant join our board, and we're excited to have Chris and his perspective in the coming years as we plan and shape the future of Pathways. Although this was an important step in our progress, it's not the only accomplishment we made in diversity and inclusion. We had a 29% growth in our number of participants who identify as a person of color. And in addition to not only supporting Al, we support 6 other participants in our community who identify in the LGBT community. This has been great strides for us as an organization to support this diverse group of participants, but we're not done yet. We need to continue to work to make sure that our staff and our board are reflective of the participants that we support in our community. Even with all of this exciting work that we've done, our core programs continue to be a key component of what we do here at Pathways. This past year, even through the pandemic, we supported 160 individuals, and that was a huge growth for us again this year. Our team here at Pathways put on 340 virtual events and over 215 in-person events. What an accomplishment to be able to do, and provided 550 opportunities for participants to practice their social skills and build new friendships and relationships from across the counties. I couldn't be more proud of the team and what they've made happen over this past year. And all of you really are part of this great team that we have here at Pathways. Your support this evening has allowed us to continue to grow, and we've raised over $10,000 for this evening to support our Pathways event. So I cannot send more gratitude to you through the screen than the fact that this will help us tremendously as we continue to strive and make accomplishments here at Pathways. Also, you know, the fact that Diana and Mike joined us again this year at Grapevine Wines to be able to present this virtual event. We are so grateful for their support of our organization and for us to continue to be able to have special events like this even during a pandemic. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for your participation tonight here at Pathways. And again, I'll remind you that we do have that 10% of purchases made at Grapevine Wines through Monday. So head on over to Kirkwood and Grapevine Wines and make a few purchases of your favorite bottles of wine from this evening. And for that, I'm going to close out the night. I really appreciate, again, everybody joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.